Hi everyone, I'm Tom Letty and I'm an Architect Evangelist at Salesforce. This video is part of our Getting Started with Salesforce Diagrams video series, and it's going to be a little bit different from some of the other videos you've seen so far. See, up until now, we've spent a lot of time sharing best practices and talking about how to make great diagrams. Today, we're going to talk about what not to do. See, there are a lot of ways to make diagrams really hard to read, and I'm guessing you've probably seen a few funky looking ones yourself. And the thing to think about when you're making your own diagrams is that you're not always going to be there to explain something to your audience when somebody else wants to look at them. So making sure that your diagram is legible is key to making sure that it's useful. Let's go ahead and take a look at some common diagram anti-patterns and talk about what we might be able to do to fix them. I've opened one of my old diagrams in Lucidchart, and if this looks familiar, it's because you may have seen the Architect Academy session where I built it. This diagram is for a nonprofit that handles donor and donation management and does some things with program management as well. Now, regardless of whether or not you saw that other video, you're probably having a tough time reading this diagram right now without any context. I know I'm having a hard time reading it, and I'm the one that made it. Now, we know this diagram is hard to read, but something that's important to think about is why? Like, what's exactly wrong with it? Let's start with some high-level issues with the diagram itself. For starters, we have no idea who owns this diagram. If you saw the original video, you know who the organization is, but I really could have made this for anybody, and there wouldn't be any way to tell just from looking at it. There's also no way to know what we're trying to show in this diagram or what our audience is even supposed to use it for. This diagram also contains a bunch of different shapes, but there's no way to interpret what they mean. Like, why are there 3 boxes over here? And what's the difference between this cloud shape and just a regular rectangle? I don't remember myself, and if I don't know, I'm going to guess you don't know either. Now, if we look a little bit closer, we can see that those issues are causing even deeper issues with some of the shapes and the lines within the diagram. So, for example, there's no clear audience or purpose for this diagram, so everything in it is just kind of mashed together, and we have this mix of systems, objects, and process steps, which is probably too much to show in one diagram. We also have a lot of duplicate information. Programs, contacts, opportunities, they're all listed multiple times in different places. And those boxes are all referring to the same objects. And if we take a look at the connectors, the only endpoints we're using are arrows. And some of the lines have numbers, but others don't. There's just no consistency here. There's also no good way to identify subcomponents. Based on this label, we can kind of guess that NPSP is part of the core Salesforce platform, but so is Experience Cloud. And there's no reason that it should be floating out here on its own like this. Same with all of these other boxes that are kind of randomly floating around the diagram. They're all related to each other in some way, but we can't really tell how by this current layout. We also have this random floating text. It looks like it describes process steps, but whatever it is, it probably belongs somewhere else besides where it is right now. Okay, so that's a lot to fix. Let's see what we can do. For starters, if we add a header to this diagram, we can address some of our biggest issues right off the bat. You can use a header to show ownership, to tell your audience what your diagram is, what it's for, and how to interpret it. But speaking of audiences, this diagram clearly has more than one of them, which is why it's so cluttered and has so many duplicate entities. So even though it's going to be a little more work, what we should really do is split it up into different diagrams and make sure that each one only contains the information that's relevant for its specific audience. We can fix a lot of the issues with our entities and connectors by using a common shape library. That'll make our diagrams a lot easier to interpret, even by other teams. And we can use our key to identify attributes that'll help us get rid of some of this random floating text. And then lastly, we can fix the issues with the connectors by making sure that we select the right endpoints instead of just using arrows. You can check out our connectors and endpoints video for a deep dive into that topic. Alright, so we just covered some common diagram anti-patterns and talked about what to do to fix them. Now, you may have been doing some of the things we described in this video in your own diagrams, and that's okay. Hopefully what you saw will help you recognize those anti-patterns early and think about what you can be doing instead. We have a lot of other great videos in this series, including some where we're going to fix this diagram, and you can see what it's going to look like when it's all cleaned up. So make sure to check out our other videos and make sure to like and subscribe if you find this content to be helpful. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.